There was one rule in our house growing up that nobody ever explained and nobody ever questioned. Don't go in the attic. Not be careful up there or ask me before you go up, just don't. My dad said it once when I was maybe 7 years old, the first time I even noticed the small wooden door at the end of the upstairs hallway, and the way he said it made me never bring it up again. Not the words themselves, but the way his face changed when he said them. My dad was not a man who scared easily. Former Navy, worked construction for 20 years, the kind of guy who fixed his own broken bones if he could. I saw that man's face do something I'd never seen it do before, and I filed the whole thing away somewhere deep and left it there. We lived in that house in a suburb outside of Louisville, Kentucky for 11 years. In 11 years, I never opened that door. My parents divorced when I was 17. Mom got the house. Dad moved to an apartment across town, and about 3 months after he left, my mom asked me to go into the attic and find a box of Christmas decorations she was certain was up there somewhere. I stood in that hallway and looked at that door for a long time. It was a small door, maybe 4 feet tall, built directly into the wall at the end of the upstairs hallway. No pull-down ladder, no panel in the ceiling, just a door with an old brass handle that had gone dark with age. I'd walked past it probably 10,000 times in 11 years and never touched it. Now I was standing in front of it with a flashlight, and my mom was downstairs waiting, and I had no good reason not to open it. I turned the handle and pulled it open. The smell hit me first. Old wood and something underneath it, something damp and stale that had been sealed in there long enough to become its own atmosphere. I clicked my flashlight on and leaned into the opening. A narrow set of wooden steps led up into darkness, the kind of stairs that are just boards nailed into supports, no backs to them, gaps between each step. I went up. The attic was low-ceilinged and long, running the full length of the house. Exposed rafters above me, bare boards underfoot, pink insulation stuffed between the wall joists, a single circular vent window at each end letting in thin gray light. My flashlight beam moved across stacked boxes, an old sewing table, a broken floor lamp, normal attic stuff, the kind of accumulated life debris that ends up in every house. I was actually starting to relax when I noticed the corner. The far left corner of the attic, past the boxes, was darker than it should have been. Not just dim, actively dark, like the flashlight beam was losing interest before it got there. I moved toward it slowly, stepping carefully on the boards. As I got closer, I could see that someone had built a partition in that corner. Not a full wall, just plywood sheets nailed to the rafters, creating a rough enclosure maybe 6 feet by 6 feet. A small dark space within the larger dark space. There was no door on it, just an opening. I stood in front of that opening for a long time without putting my flashlight beam inside it. I don't know how to explain that pause except to say that some part of my brain was sending up a signal that I was picking up without being able to read clearly, like a frequency just outside of hearing, something that said stop without using the word. I put the flashlight beam inside. Empty. 4 plywood walls, bare board floor, low ceiling. Nothing in there. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding and moved the flashlight beam around the interior slowly. That's when I saw the marks on the walls. Scratch marks, covering every interior surface from floor level up to about shoulder height. Deep ones, made by something with enough force and enough repetition to gouge the raw plywood down to pale fresh wood beneath. They weren't random, they moved in patterns. Horizontal lines at regular intervals, clusters in the corners, and near the floor on the right wall, something that might have been letters or might have been something else entirely that I couldn't make myself look at long enough to figure out. Whatever had been put in that enclosure had spent a very long time trying to get out. I left the Christmas decorations in the attic. I went downstairs and told my mom I couldn't find them. I never told her what I found instead. I called my dad that night and without any preamble asked him why we were never allowed in the attic. The phone was quiet for a long time. Then he said that when they first bought the house, the previous owner told him the attic had been used for storage for a long time, that things had been kept up there, that he didn't explain further and my dad didn't ask because something about the way the man said it made him not want to know. I asked him if he'd ever been up there himself. He said once, the first week we moved in, just to check. I asked him what he found. Another long silence. He said he found a small room someone had built in the corner. He said he looked inside it, and then he said he spent the next 11 years making absolutely certain that none of us went up there and saw what he saw, because some things you cannot unsee, and he wanted to protect us from that for as long as he possibly could. I asked him what was in that room. He said he couldn't tell me. Not wouldn't, couldn't. And I've spent every night since that phone call trying to decide if I actually want to know what my flashlight missed in those marks on the wall, what my dad saw that I didn't, what was kept in that 6x6 box of plywood in the corner of our attic for long enough to scratch every surface down to bare wood trying to find a way out. Some nights, I almost call him back, but I remember the way his voice sounded on that phone, and I leave it alone. I want to be upfront about something. I bought my house knowing it was cheap for a reason. The listing price was $40,000 below comparable homes on the same street in Macon, Georgia. 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, decent yard, good bones. The realtor told me the previous owner had passed away inside the home and that some buyers found that off-putting. I told her I was a 32-year-old nurse who had watched people die more times than she could count and that I'd take it. I signed the papers on a Thursday and moved in the following weekend. I was practical about it. That's who I am. I don't believe in ghosts. I believe in bad plumbing and electrical issues and foundation problems, the actual things that make old houses dangerous. I walked through every room on move-in day with a flashlight and a notepad, making a list of things that needed fixing. Cracked grout in the master bath, a sticky window in the back bedroom, a kitchen faucet that dripped. I saved the attic for last. The access panel was in the ceiling of the second-floor hallway. Standard pull-down ladder, newer than the rest of the house by the look of it, like someone had replaced it recently. I pulled it down and climbed up and swept my flashlight around and made my notes. Needed new insulation. 1 rafter showing early water damage near the east vent. Boxes left behind by the previous owner that I'd need to sort through eventually. I climbed back down and went to bed, and slept fine. The first sound came 3 nights later. I was almost asleep when I heard it, a slow, rhythmic creaking from directly above my bedroom. Footsteps, heavy and deliberate, moving from one end of the attic to the other and back again. I lay there and listened and counted the steps, and they were consistent every single time. 14 steps one direction, pause, 14 steps back, over and over. I went upstairs and pulled the attic ladder down and climbed up with my flashlight. Nothing. Empty attic. Same boxes, same rafters, same insulation. I stood up there for 5 minutes listening to complete silence, and then climbed back down feeling slightly foolish. Old house, I told myself. Thermal expansion, settling, the wood reacting to the temperature dropping at night. I'd heard these explanations 100 times. I believed them. By the end of the week, I'd stopped believing them, because the footsteps had developed a pattern I could not explain away. They started at exactly 11 p.m. every night. Not around 11, not close to 11, 11 o'clock exactly, like something up there had a schedule, and they always stopped at exactly midnight. 1 hour, every night, 14 steps back and forth above my head. I set up a camera, baby monitor with a wide-angle lens pointed at the center of the attic, live streaming to my phone. I watched it from my bed the next night with the volume all the way up. At 11 p.m., the footsteps started. I watched the camera feed. Nothing moved. The boxes sat where they were, the insulation didn't shift. The attic was completely still and completely empty, while directly below it, I could hear something walking back and forth above my ceiling. I called my sister Dana in Atlanta and told her everything. She drove up that Saturday and spent the night. I didn't tell her about the 11 p.m. schedule. I wanted a second opinion without planting the idea. At 11:03, she grabbed my arm across the kitchen table. She'd heard it. We went upstairs together, pulled the ladder down together, climbed up together, found nothing together, came back down and sat in my kitchen, and she drank half a glass of wine without saying anything. Then she asked me if I knew how the previous owner had died. I told her I knew it was inside the home, but not the details. She looked at me for a second and then pulled out her phone and started searching. She found a local news article from 14 months ago. The previous owner was a 71-year-old man named Harold Pruitt, who had lived in the house for 38 years alone after his wife passed. The article said he'd been found after neighbors noticed his mail piling up. It said he'd been found after neighbors noticed his mail piling up. It said he'd been dead for an estimated several days before anyone checked. It said he was found in the attic. Dana slept with the light on that night. In the morning, she told me to move out. I told her I wasn't going to let a dead man's death drive me out of a house I'd bought legally, and she looked at me like I'd said something genuinely stupid. I wish I'd listened to her. Because 2 weeks after that, the footsteps changed. 14 steps to the other end, pause, and then instead of 14 steps back, silence. A long silence. And then, directly above my bedroom, right above the spot where my bed sat against the wall, the slow, deliberate sound of something lowering itself to the floor, settling, going still, like it had finally found where I slept. I moved out 4 days later. I'm renting a one-bedroom apartment on the 3rd floor of a modern building in downtown Macon with concrete ceilings and no attic anywhere in the structure. I've still got the house, can't sell it yet, the market's bad right now, so I pay the mortgage on an empty building on a street in a neighborhood I won't drive through after dark. My property manager checks on it once a month. Last month he called me after his visit and asked me if I'd been inside recently. I told him no. I hadn't been back since I left. He was quiet for a second. Then he said he could hear something moving around upstairs. I told him to lock up and leave. He asked me if everything was okay with the property. I told him the house was fine. I told him some things just take a while to settle. I grew up in a 2-story house on Briar Creek Road in a small suburb outside of Columbus, Ohio. Brown shutters, oak tree in the front yard, the kind of neighborhood where everyone knows everyone and nothing bad ever happens. My parents bought it the year before I was born. I lived there from birth until I left for college at 18. 12 years after that, my mom still lives there alone and calls me every Sunday. I've never told her what I'm about to tell you. I was 6 years old the first time I heard the voice. I'd been put to bed around 8:30. My room was on the 2nd floor directly below the attic. The attic had a pull-down access panel in the ceiling of the upstairs hallway, the kind with the folding wooden ladder attached. We never used it. My dad said there was nothing up there worth getting to. Old insulation, some boxes from before I was born, a dead wasp nest in one corner. He'd been up there exactly once when we first moved in and never went back. I was lying in bed that first night, completely awake, when I heard something shift above me, a slow dragging sound, like something being moved across a wooden floor. I pulled my blanket up and stared at the ceiling and told myself it was the house settling. I was 6. I didn't know what else to tell myself. Then I heard the humming, soft, tuneless, the kind of sound you make when you're doing something with your hands and you're not even aware you're making noise. It lasted maybe 20 seconds and stopped. I didn't sleep for the rest of that night. In the morning, I told my mom the attic was making sounds, and she said old houses do that, and made me pancakes, and that was the end of the conversation. It kept happening. Not every night, maybe 2 or 3 times a week. The dragging sound, sometimes footsteps, light ones, the weight of something small, and always eventually the humming. I got used to it the way kids get used to things when they don't have a choice. It became background noise. Scary background noise, but background noise. By the time I was 8, I could fall asleep through it most nights. The first time I saw her was I was 9. I'd gotten up to use the bathroom around 2 a.m. Our hallway was dark except for the nightlight plugged in near the bathroom door. I padded out of my room half asleep and stopped dead in the middle of the hallway because there was a shadow at the end of it that shouldn't have been there. A girl, roughly my height, maybe slightly taller, standing at the far end of the hallway near the pull-down attic panel, completely still, facing me. She was dark. Not like darkness, she appeared dark, like a silhouette with no light source to cast it. No features I could make out, just a shape that was clearly a girl standing in my hallway at 2 a.m., looking in my direction. I stood there for what felt like a very long time. Then the nightlight near the bathroom flickered once, and she was gone. I ran back to my room and got under my covers and did not come out until my mom knocked on my door in the morning. I told her I thought I saw someone in the hallway. She checked everywhere, including the attic, and found nothing. She told me it was a bad dream, and I almost believed her because I needed to. But then she started saying my name. I was 10 the first time it happened. I was almost asleep, that halfway place where you're not quite gone yet, and I heard it. My name, whispered. So close it felt like it came from the pillow next to my head. I sat up and turned the lamp on, and the room was empty. I checked under the bed, checked the closet. Nothing. It happened again 3 nights later. Same time, same place, same whisper. Quiet and clear and completely certain of itself. Not aggressive, not threatening. The way you'd whisper someone's name if you were trying to gently wake them up. That careful, specific sound of someone who knows exactly who they're talking to. I told my best friend Tyler about it when I was 11. He slept over one Friday night, and I explained everything. The sounds, the shadow, the whisper, and he laughed at me and said I was messing with him. He slept on the air mattress on my floor that night, and at some point past midnight, he shook me awake with both hands. He'd heard the humming. He didn't sleep either. He never spent the night at my house again, and we didn't talk about it after that, not once in the remaining years of our friendship. I left for college at 18 and told myself I was done with it. New city, new room, new ceiling with nothing above it but open air. And it worked. For the first time in 12 years, I slept through the night without listening for sounds above me. But here is the thing I've never been able to get past. I went home for Thanksgiving my freshman year. First night back in my old room, first night in months. I lay down in that familiar bed and looked up at that familiar ceiling and thought maybe I'd outgrown it. Maybe whatever it was had moved on. Maybe it was just an overactive childhood imagination. Then the humming started, and then barely above a breath, like it had been waiting the entire time I was gone. My name. Patient, soft, like a greeting, like it was glad I was finally home.